Thank you everyone for that. Welcome back to the Truth Channel, and we are on episode 12, and we continue reading the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ. We are on the chapter Crucifixion Practices, and we will continue in the middle of the chapter. Alright, so when the nailing was completed, the titulus was attached to the cross by the nails or cords just above the victim's head. This was the sign that gave the man's name and his crime. The soldiers and the civilian crowd often taunted and jeered the condemned man, and the soldiers customarily divided up his clothes among themselves. With knowledge of both anatomy and ancient crucifixion practices, one may reconstruct the probable medical aspects of this form of slow execution. Each wound apparently was intended to produce intense agony, and the contributing causes of death were numerous. The scourging prior to the crucifixion served to weaken the condemned man, and if blood loss was considerable, to produce orthostatic hypotension and even hypovolemic shock. When the victim was thrown to the ground on his back in preparation for transfixion of his hands, his scourging wounds most likely became torn open and again contaminated with dirt. Furthermore, with each respiration, the painful scourging wounds would be scraped against the rough wood stipes. As a result, blood loss from the back would probably continue throughout the crucifixion ordeal. With the arms outstretched, but not taut, the wrists were nailed to the patibulum. It has been shown that the ligaments and bones of the wrist can support the weight of the body hanging from them, but the palms cannot. Accordingly, the iron spikes were probably driven between the radius of the carpals or between the two rows of carpal bones, either proximal or two rows of carpal bones, either proximal to or through the strong band-like flexor reticulicum or retinaculum and the various intercarpal ligaments. Although a nail in either location in the wrist might pass between the bony elements and thereby produce no fractures, the likelihood of painful periosteal injury would seem great. Furthermore, the driven nail would crush or sever the rather large sensomotor medium nerve. The stimulated nerve would produce excruciating bouts of fiery pain in both arms. Although the severed median nerve would result in paralysis of a portion of the hand, asymmetric constructures and impalement of various ligaments by the iron spike might produce a claw-like grasp. Most commonly, the feet were fixed to the front of the stipes by means of an iron spike driven through the fists or through the first and second intermedial space. the distal to the dorsal metatarsal joint, it is likely that the deep parietal nerve and branches of the length of survival generally range from 3 to 4 hours to 3 to 4 days, and appears to have been inversely related to the severity of the scourging. However, even if the scourging had been relatively mild, the Roman soldiers could hasten death by breaking the legs below the knees. Crucifixion. Not uncommonly, insects would light upon or burrow into the open wounds or the eyes, ears, nose of the dying, helpless victim, and birds would prey and tear at these sites. Moreover, it was customary to leave the corpse on the cross to be devoured by predatory animals. However, by Roman law, the family of the condemned could come and take the body for burial after obtaining permission from the Roman judge. This was the case for Jesus, as Joseph of Arimathea came and asked Pilate for the body. Since no one was intended to survive crucifixion, the body was not released to the family until the soldiers were sure that the victim was dead. By custom, one of the Roman guards would pierce the body with a sword or lance. Traditionally, this had been considered a spear wound to the heart through the right side of the chest. A fatal wound would probably taught to most Roman soldiers. Respirators during crucifixion left inhalation with elbows extended and shoulders abducted. Respiratory muscles and inhalation are passively stretched and the thorax expanded. Right exhalation with elbows. Exhalation with elbows flexed and shoulders abducted with a weight of the body on nailed feet. Exhalation is accomplished as active rather than passive process. Breaking legs below the knees would place burden of exhalation on the shoulders and arms alone, and soon would result in exhaustion and asphyxia. Medial and lateral plantar nerves would have been injured by the nails. Although scourging may have resulted in considerable blood loss, crucifixion per se was a relatively bloodless procedure, since no major arteries other than perhaps the deep plantar arc passed through the favored anatomic sites of transfixion. The major physiologic effect of crucifixion, beyond the excruciating pain, was marked interference with normal respiration, particularly exhalation. The weight of the body pulling down on the outstretched arms and shoulders would tend to fix the intercostal muscles in an inhalation state, thereby hinder passive exhalation. Accordingly, exhalation was primarily diaphragmatic, and breathing was shallow. It is likely that this form of respiration would not suffice and that hypercarbia would soon result. The onset of muscle cramps and tonic contractions due to fatigue and hypercarbia would hinder respiration even further. The adequate exhalation required lifting the body by pushing up on the feet and by flexing the elbows and shoulder and adducting the shoulders. However, this maneuver would place the entire weight of the body on the tarsals and would produce searing pain. Furthermore, flexion of the elbows would cause rotation of the wrists about the iron nails, causing fiery pain along the damaged median nerves. Lifting the body would also painfully scrape the scourge back against the rough wooden stipes. Muscle cramps and parathenesis of the outstretched and uplifted arms would add to the discomfort. As a result, each respiratory effort would become agonizing and tiring and lead eventually to asphyxia. The actual cause of death by crucifixion was multifactorial and varied somewhat with each case, but two most prominent causes probably were hypovolemic shock and exhaustion asphyxia. Other possible contributing factors included dehydration, stress-induced arrhythmias, and congestive heart failure. With the rapid accumulation of the pericardial, perhaps pleural effusions can fracture, breaking the legs below the knees, if performed, led to asphyxiatic death within minutes. Death by crucifixion was in every sense of the word excruciating. On the physical death of Jesus. Two aspects of Jesus' death have been the source of great controversy, namely the nature of his side wound and the cause of death only several hours after being on the cross. The Gospel of John describes the piercing of Jesus' side and emphasizes the sudden flow of blood and water. Some authors have interpreted the flow of water to be ascites, or urine, from an abdominal midline perforation of the bladder. However, the Greek word pleura is used by John, clearly denoted literally and often implied the ribs. Therefore, it seems probable that the wound was in the thorax and well away from the abdominal midline. Although the side wound was not designated by John, it is traditionally have been depicted on the right side. Supporting this tradition is the fact that a large flow of blood and water was more likely with a perforation and distended a thin-walled right atrium or ventricle than the thick-walled and contracted left ventricle. Although the side wound may never be established with certainty, the right seems more probable than the left.